So there's a lot of talk about Lionsgate and manifestation and abundance and calling things in. But when I asked what does the collective need to know for Lionsgate, the first card that came out was feeding on the past. What are you feeding yourself from the past? Sometimes when we hold on to stories or memories from the past, we think that it's actually protecting us. There was like some fear or some danger or something that we feel like if we remember this, like we can stop it from happening to us again. Or we might think, like, if I analyze every detail about this thing, then I'll finally understand it. Or if I keep my guard up, then no one can ever hurt me in that way again. But there comes a point where holding on to things as protection can actually be a way of imprisoning ourselves. You don't have to pretend that what happened didn't matter, and you don't have to forgive something that you're not ready to forgive, but you do have to decide how much energy you are going to give something from the past in your present life. And I think that this is exactly what this card is asking you. Take the lesson with you, but don't keep feeding the wound. And then next, these three came out together: focus, toxic thoughts, and memories. And the focus is asking us, where is your attention going? And it really ties in with the feeding of the past. Toxic thoughts talks about the difference between what is actually happening in reality and the story that is going on in our mind. And memories is a reminder that we can reinvent ourselves at any time and that we are not stuck in one version of ourselves. The focus card is also asking, to gain clarity, there might be a need for you to maybe do breath work or meditation or, walking in nature, something that clears your mind and allows you to gain a level of peace, even if it's just momentarily. And, you could, take a hot bath, something like that. And so there is definitely, that suggestion coming out there. But with the card Toxic Thoughts, this character Ashiok feeds on people's nightmares and fears and then gives those fears form. But think about that for a second. Like, fear begins internally, but when we constantly continue feeding it, it actually shapes how we experience life. Maybe someone betrayed you and then the story becomes, I can never trust anyone. Or maybe someone left and then the story becomes, everybody leaves me. Or maybe you had a situation that didn't work out and then the story becomes, nothing works out for me. So, that's just an example of how we have a fear and then it starts to actually create our reality. And those are two different things. What happened to you is an experience, but what you decided about that experience is a story. So, and that's where like this memories card comes in. And this character on the card, she's actually a Medusa. This card is all about you can choose differently. You can become someone different. You don't have to remain frozen in the version of yourself that existed when the worst thing happened to you. And the mythology on this card is really interesting because she's a Medusa. So she turns her victims into stone. And that actually is what painful memories can do to us. They freeze us in time. And if we allow it, somebody forever becomes the person who hurt us, and we forever become the person who was hurt. So, but you're not frozen. You are still moving. You are still growing. You are still becoming this new version of you. And I think that's, the whole point here is not asking what do I want out of this Lionsgate? But maybe it's more of who am I becoming in this chapter of my life? Because you can ask for a completely different life while still living in the identity of how you used to see yourself. Like, you can also ask for a healthy love while still thinking that you are unlovable. And you can ask for freedom from something, but you're still making decisions based on something that happened 5 years ago. So if you do have an old story that keeps replaying, you can ask yourself, is this really happening now? Or am I experiencing the past again? And that question alone can change a lot. And then we get your true self and breaking free. And which is beautiful because it's moving from what you're releasing into what you're stepping toward. And your true self, it is asking you to show up and release the mask. And maybe that mask is, the personality that you developed in order to survive something. Like maybe whatever you went through caused you to be hyper independent or guarded. Or maybe you're the person that just never needs anybody. Those versions of you served a purpose. They might have gotten you through something. But this card is asking you to actually show your true self. I don't know if you can see the guy in the background with his mouth open. He's just shocked. And I love that these came together because breaking free isn't always just walking away from another person or like a situation. It can be walking away from an identity. And in this season, I feel like your identity might be changing. You're becoming a completely different person through your healing. Maybe you're no longer the person that requires an apology before they can move on from something. Or maybe you used to always assume the worst because that's always what happened before. Something like that. But you're allowed to outgrow that version of yourself that just learned how to survive in the past. And in the bottom of the deck, we have tunnel vision. It asks whether the way that you've been seeing your situation is the only way that it could be seen. He's got one eye, he's got one perspective, one way of looking at something. And when we're hurt or angry or afraid or deeply attached to an outcome, our vision can become incredibly narrow. We can get tunnel vision in a negative way. But this card is asking you to change your perception of whatever happened to you in the past, even if it was painful. You always hear like, rejection is protection. And, this card's saying like, yeah, rejection is actually redirection. Maybe losing something wasn't, really the end. Maybe it was the end of that version of your life because you've completely outgrown it. Sometimes things happen to us and they can be very painful, and you don't have to force yourself to call it a blessing, but you can eventually decide that experience doesn't have the final word on what it meant to you. I think the whole message here for the Lionsgate is for you to participate in your own transformation. So on the bottom of the deck, we had the tunnel vision, and then it goes to inspiration to creative fire. So what are you about to create, starting with this Lionsgate? But I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for being with me. And if you would please like, subscribe, and comment, it would mean the world to me. And see you next time. Love you. Bye.